All right, magic makers, let's show hands. Who right now is walking, right? We all talk about those 10,000 steps and all that magical stuff. But okay, and also, who of you are wearing a weighted vest, thinking about buying one, or wondering what the heck rucking is? Or is it just some other fitness trend with just a cuter, bigger backpack? Today, we're talking all about rucking, and it's not CrossFit misery unless that brings you joy. It's not about military cosplay. It's just about walking with purpose and a little weight. So I have to, I got to bring experts. And I have Miss Kayla Girgen. She is a registered dietitian, certified personal trainer, and she's the founder of Strength and Sugar and Strength Academy. And she helps women balance blood sugar, build strength, and stop overcomplicating fitness. You hear that? You know how that's how I roll. And she just wrote a book all about rucking. And if you are tired of workouts that feel like a second job, raise your hand. This conversation is going to give you that nice big inhale you have been looking for. So we are going to break down what the hell rucking is all about. How does it compare to a weighted vest? And why it might be the smartest thing you've ever done this year. All right, welcome to the show, Miss Kyla.
Hello, so nice to be here.
Yeah, I feel like this year one of the big kind of like things that have blown up, especially for the women over 40, is the weighted vest. And so you have, those experts being like, it's bullshit. We have people who are saying, rock on with your bad self. So what exactly is the difference between a ruck and a weighted vest?
Yes, I will say that a ruck is the actual backpack piece. And you can go for a ruck. So it could be a noun, it could be a verb, but typically, like when you're rucking, you're walking with weight. So I would say that technically, walking with a weighted vest,
Is
or
rucking.
let me back up. Weighted walking is you can do with a vest or a ruck. Rucking is going to be having that backpack. So there are, I would say, some big differences when it comes to posture. So, for example, like you mentioned, like middle-aged women are really targeted for things like weighted vests.
Oh yeah.
One consideration is just the posture differences. So, being that the weight is on the front and back, you might not get some of the posture correction that you get with a ruck. So, a ruck again is that more resembles a backpack. You've got your weight in it, 100% of that weight is on the back. So what is nice is because we're all seated all day long and in front of screens, it does tend to straighten you out a little bit and pull back your hunched shoulders. So that is, I would say, one thing. And then with weighted vest, typically you're buying those in a fixed weight. So it's eight
Gotcha.
pounds, it's 15 pounds. In order to change that weight, you're having to buy oftentimes a whole new vest. So those are a big couple differentiators that I like to point out.
Gotcha. And I like that differentiation because you're right. It is most people, you're right. You do you're always warned like, okay, when you're looking for your weighted vest, like buy X% above your or of your body weight so that you're not like suddenly putting like the small toddler on your body and trying to walk around with it.
Right.
And so, because I feel like, when you say weighted vest, it seems like nice and dainty and cute. Where like
Mm-hmm.
rucking seems like, I used to coach a couple of girls who were in the military and they rucked because like, yeah, they're carrying a lot of shit on their back when they're being deployed. So, you know, why does rucking sound so intense?
Yeah, I would say it's the military route. So rucking was really born in the military. And I think now it's become a little bit more softened around the edges with things like you mentioned, weighted vests. Typically, I see a couple camps of women, like some people are like, I want to wear a ruck. I want it to be heavy. I want it to feel badass. And then I see the other end of the spectrum where it's like, I'm going to ease into this. I'm going to wear my 8 pound vest. So I think that there's really a continuum of like where you want to take it. And I would say with rucking, like any sort of exercise, or I would say specifically resistance training, you really want to focus on progressive overload. So, kind of increasing that
Yeah.
difficulty over time, especially to avoid injury.
Yeah, for sure. And the women of the 40 something generation, were all like, if I wasn't suffering bleeding from the eyes, it wasn't a workout.
Exactly. Right. Yes. And I think this kind of spins it a little bit because rucking can be something that fits into your life. How you said in the beginning, how many people are walking already? This is something where you can add a little weight, you can really multitask your workout, but I will say you don't have to turn every walk into a ruck because I
Right.
see that too where, we want to go all or nothing. It's either I'm doing nothing or I'm going all in, and this kind of allows you to play on that scale a little bit.
The funny thing is there's a meme of like people talking about like going on vacation and they're like, how can I put my weighted vest? Like, should I wear it to the airport? Like, am I willing to like lose a pair of shoes so I can put my weighted vest? And I'm like, for the love of God, like that's when you've like taken it just this far.
Right. Yeah, and I'm thinking like how are you meeting the baggage limitations
I
too? Like
know. I was
like
like,
you
10
really have
pounds
to
is more than
plan
a pair of
carefully.
shoes.
Yeah.
So, here you are, you wrote this book. Like, how did rucking show up in your life?
Yeah, it was something I found during the pandemic when we were all kind of gyms were closed down, and I feel like, mentally I was unwell, and rucking really helped my mental health, I would say. Initially, I got into it for the physical benefits. I was like, okay, I can, burn more calories and put on a little muscle and build bone density all with just adding weight to my walks. And I was like, okay,
Mm,
check, check, check. But I think really what I appreciated is it got me outside. So I heard about
right.
rucking on a podcast. If you've read Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, he talks a little bit about rucking, and that is an excellent book, I'll say. But he talks a little bit about rucking, and I think people started to pick up on it a little bit more. And like you had mentioned, it can be a little bit intimidating, but I think we're seeing softer versions of rucking, especially for women. And it's something that you can easily kind of scale up. But the physical benefits got me in it. The mental is really what kept me coming back. It got me into nature and out of my head, and it just became like my little sanctuary. And I call it like, okay, I'm going to go get my emotional support steps in today
Right.
because I'm a much better person when I do that.
I laugh because usually every day around 3 o'clock I go for a walk and I always call it my constitutional. And my husband's like, "Why do you call it your constitutional?" I'm like, "Because I'm not a raving bitch when I go on these walks."
Right. And it's like the sometimes too when I find myself with a lot of resistance, like I really don't want to go out for a walk today. Like that's when I need it most.
Right.
Like
And there are times that I get absorbed in things that I'm like, oh, and I live on the East Coast, so like if I'm not out by 3 o'clock, that it's dark, and I'm like, I'm not going out in the dark, and it's also colder. But if it's like sometimes I find myself like deep in stuff, and I'm like, oh crap, I didn't go for my walk today. But it's like, all right, let's just make sure we set that alarm for 3 o'clock so that like the darkness doesn't like kill my vibe. So I think most people get intimidated for rucking because I think you saw the popularity grow during the whole big CrossFit craze that was in the early 2000s. And so I think most people think that you have to be a CrossFitter and you have to be this like you said badass person in order to do the rucking. But here you are, right? You're a dietitian, you're a trainer, and you made rucking like your thing.
yeah, it was something I started sharing about like once I did it and I got so many questions on it. So I was sharing things on social media and then a lot of times it was just getting responses of how much weight do I start with? Can I do it on a treadmill? Can I do all of these things? And I was like, okay, there's something here. Like people want to do something and maybe increase that intensity. I see women especially like they love walking, but sometimes feel like it isn't enough.
Right.
And this is, I think, a way to make that enough.
Right. It gives you kind of the next level without feeling like you have to go out and run a marathon.
Exactly. And it's a lot nicer on your joints too. So I think with age, like maybe you can't run like you used to if you have any like foot, hip, knee issues. Rucking is low impact. So you can scale up that intensity without hammering on your joints too, which is really a big benefit.
Now, and this is also like you um you've seen both sides of the coin. Some people are like, yeah, great, walk with weight on your body. And it's nice, cute. And then you see other people who are like, oh yeah, walk with weight because, it does increase bone density. It does help you burn more calories. So it's like, you see both sides of the coin. And for me, I'm like, hey, if it brings you joy, rock on with your bad self. So where do you stand with, adding weight to your walk?
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the mentality of like optimizing everything,
Hmm.
and we oftentimes take it so far. But I would say, like, thinking about how I'm using it or how I use it with like clients or somebody maybe new into it, it's like maybe this looks like 1 to 3 times a week getting started. And then in the summertime, I'm in the Midwest. So the summertime is like, this is the time to be outside.
Yeah, I'm in Boston, so yeah, we're like, right now we're in the like the dark days, and we're just like counting the days down until like March.
Until the time or the daylight starts going the
Yeah,
other direction.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, but I would say that like then in the summer maybe it's 5 days a week. Like I really treat rucking as my cardio because I
Mm,
hate cardio and I
yeah,
feel like for
yeah.
me this is cardio that doesn't suck, and if I can get some extra benefit like, transferring that weight load to, for example, your legs or glutes and core, you can build some of that strength at the same time. So I think it's a great way to multitask, but I will say too, like some days you just need to go for a walk. If your body's
Yeah.
not feeling it, you don't have to optimize every single walk. It's okay. More stress, even if it is in the form of working out, isn't always better. And I know you're a big proponent, like, okay, let's look at the whole person here. Because if that stress bucket is overflowing, then, maybe you're just going outside to get outside for those mental health benefits too.
Right. And I like that you said that because you're right. Like so many people feel like, and this is my bullshit coming out. I was guilty of that. Like everything had to check a box. And if I didn't check a box, then you would spiral because you're like, why couldn't I check the box? Like, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But I feel like you just said it. Like sometimes a walk is a walk. And there are plenty of times I have a weighted vest, plenty of times it's just sitting in my mudroom. And then I get home, I'm like, oh yeah, I could have put it on. But it's never the thought of like, for me, I'm like, I just need to get out of this house because if I don't leave, I won't leave.
Exactly. And I always like to ask people, like, what's your on ramp? Like to get into a consistent routine. Like maybe it's not wearing the
Yeah.
vest every time, but like you said, maybe it's just getting outside today. I feel like we put such lofty goals in front of us and then we just hesitate because they're too daunting to even get started with.
Yeah. My walk started with like literally like, could I just walk for 15 minutes? And, I was like, wait, who couldn't do anything for 15 minutes? And then it was just kind of like, it's grown over time. I max out probably like 30 minutes, but it's like, I had to start somewhere and it was a bite size chew. Um, so one of the things that we hear also is with walking is after meals. And I know that you are a big proponent of the continuous glucose monitor. So is do we see truly a decrease in blood sugar after, walking after we take in a meal?
Yes, 100%. So oftentimes, I think one thing that isn't always maybe addressed is how we can bring down blood sugar without the use of insulin. So that's
Mhm.
especially helpful after a meal. So any sort of muscle contraction, it doesn't have to be a walk or a ruck after a meal. It could even be body weight squats or stretching or whatever you're doing to contract those muscles. That is essentially going to help soak up circulating glucose from that meal. So it doesn't, again, if walking is out of the picture, it's just really anything that's contracting those muscles. I've had a lot of people like they're like at work after lunch I'm in the bathroom doing body weight squats or something, or every time I go to
Yeah.
the bathroom just kind of
Right.
incorporating little bits of movement throughout the day.
Gotcha. So now, what do women get wrong when they try to either rock or put on a weighted vest?
I would say a couple things. One is not doing it. I have so many conversations where like, I got my weighted vest and I was like, can't wait to see your first rock. And they're like, oh, I'll do it, when it's nice outside or
Right.
I'm waiting for these perfect conditions still. So I
Right.
see a lot of hesitations. Like we just want the conditions to be perfect or,
Ugh.
wonder what our neighbors are going to think if they see me walking around the neighborhood with a backpack or a weighted vest. I'm like, I promise they're going to get used to it and maybe it'll rub off on
Right.
them. But I see that there's a lot of hesitation in actually taking action and doing it or waiting for the perfect time.
Yes.
Yeah, so
And
it's like
it's
just do it. The hardest one is the first one, and once you do it, you're gonna want to do more of it.
Yeah, I think, and I laugh because, you think about like the perfect time to go to the gym. Like you literally have to like get in the car, drive to a gym, and maybe you're uncomfortable. Like people are going to watch me work out, but it's like you're walking out of your house and you're maybe walking the neighborhood, going on, making it easy that you can just walk out of the house. You're not saying you got to go to said park or path and climb up a mountain that looks like, super high. But you're right. There's so many people who kind of put all of these invisible barriers in front of them to just instead of just getting started.
Yeah, we're so good at that. Or
Oh, amazing, amazing. We could tell like if we could write our own stories, like if we'd be like our story is a limited series, people would be like, "Girl, that is so freaking stupid." Like that.
and we know that like we could list off all the benefits or like I'm going to feel 10 times better once I, go for
Hmm.
a walk around the block or whatever it is. But yeah, there's just so much resistance there.
Yeah, we can totally be like, we could come up with our own bullshit. It's so much easier. Uh,
Exactly.
and so how much, is there a way that you max out? Because I know that like, we want to start with like a very low weight just to kind of start to acclimate. So two-part question. So what weight would you recommend people start with? And then I mean, do you progress? Is it just like I'm just sticking with this weight I have? Like what is your recommendations here?
Yeah, I would say that was maybe where women get it wrong. Part two is staying at 8 pounds for eternity because
Right.
you do get more benefits, I would say, as you ramp up. However, thinking back to like why is rucking so intimidating, you don't have to ruck with military amounts of weight to
Right.
get the benefits because oftentimes we're seeing where, young fit men are rucking with 80 to 100 pounds on their back. And that's not the rucking that we're talking about. We're talking about, maybe maxing out at 30% of your body weight. But you don't have to get all the way up there. I haven't gotten there. I would say when I first started, or, most women can start pretty comfortably with 10 pounds. I think that's a great kind of entry level. And you
Mm,
can see, maybe like for me personally, I just grabbed an old backpack, wrapped a dumbbell in a bath towel, and threw it in there. Like I learned pretty quickly it wasn't the most comfortable or it didn't hold weight like I wanted to. So eventually I got ruck plates, which resemble they're like rectangular, nice and thin. They slide into the interior pocket on a backpack. But when you get that weight like nice and high and tight and make sure it's not moving around,
gotcha.
that is one important piece too. You don't want it like flopping around. So mechanics is really important.
Gotcha. So and that leads into this question. So like you said, most people are like, "Oh, I'll just put a book in my backpack," or, so yes, you can DIY this. But like you said, my mind would be where your head went. I'm like, I got a 10-pound dumbbell, I'll just throw it in a backpack. Right. And so, like you said, it's gonna just sink to the bottom of the backpack and just pretty much bang into your low back. So that's
Yes.
not fun. So if you were to kind of DIY it, think about something that is kind of like a textbook, a cookbook. So something that is a little bit more uh evenly weighted.
Exactly. And I've seen some really clever creations where people will stuff the bottom of their backpack with old yoga blocks or, maybe like bath towels or old yoga mats and like add some light filler so that way it keeps the weight. Or a
Right.
lot of times if you have like an old hiking backpack, they have where you'd hang a hydration bladder. You can suspend the weight so that way it's
Ah,
higher up too. You just might need some tough rope. But the
yeah.
biggest thing is keeping it secure and ideally kind of high and tight so think about like kind of between like mid to upper back, between your shoulders, somewhere in there is going to be the most optimal. Especially as you start carrying heavier weight, I would say if you get 20 pounds or higher, then it can be really nice to have a rucking specific backpack because they'll have a velcroed pocket where you're just sliding in the weight plates. And I would say, kind of going back to your question about like how do we progress, I would say usually like 5 to 10% at a time. So if you're looking at, okay, I'm going to start with 10 pounds, I'm going to give that a whirl for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'm going to add in, if you're DIYing it, maybe it's a can of beans or a couple, like one can is about a pound. Maybe you're adding a couple of those things to help go to help slowly increase that too. So you can get creative if you're DIYing.
Right. And then, is there a point that you get to a weight that you're like, this sucks?
I would say like rucking part of it is being comfortably uncomfortable. So that's I think some of the mechanics and the benefit comes from that. But I will say too, like say if you're scaling up weight, Like you can vary that weight. Say you don't always have to go up. So
Yeah.
for example, it's like my base weight usually goes from 20, 25 pounds. It's like sometimes if I'm not really feeling it, I'll go down to 15. Sometimes I'll go up to 35 if I'm going for a short distance. So you can vary it, which I think is really important too. You don't always have to ruck with the same weight.
So similar to, any workout, like if you're feeling yourself, you might go a little bit heavier. If you're like, I'm just going to get this done, it's either no weight or a lighter weight.
Exactly. And I would say there's other variables you can pull too. So weight is the most straightforward, like adding weight, removing weight. You can also go a longer distance or play with
Mm.
speed as well. But hills, like if you're doing anything with incline, that even more so than weight
Yeah, yeah,
is
for
really
sure.
going to ramp up the intensity. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't try to do it all at once. Like don't go for 5 miles uphill heavy weight. It's like pick one of those variables and maybe experiment with that first.
So now, there are women who listen to this that already, I'm like, I'm already in the gym. I'm already strength training. How do you see that? How can I incorporate this into what I'm already lifting at the gym?
I would consider like rucking certainly not going to replace strength training. You'll certainly need that. But I would say, depending on your fitness level, I see a lot of times where rucking can be like fill more of that cardio component,
Mm.
especially if you're maybe doing lighter, longer rucks, or you may be watching your heart rate or trying to do zone specific things. But then on the other end, if somebody's really new to strength training, I think rucking can be a great entry level thing where you're taking your walk, you're adding some weight, maybe you're leaning out and adding a little bit of muscle, particularly on your lower half, just because that's where the weight is transferred. And then you're always going to have to do some sort of like accessory movements with arms, upper body. So, depending on what your current fitness routine is, I would say rucking can be that cardio component, or it can fulfill maybe that entry point or that on ramp into doing something like more formal strength training and eventually kind of bleeding into that cardio component, if that makes sense.
So, yeah, it does make sense.
Hmm.
So, the other thing that you kind of touched on is, and I know I'm gonna go out on that limb. Like, I think it's ridiculously, I think it's ridiculous, and I don't encourage people to do this. But someone will say, "Oh, then I'll just walk with weights in my hands and put on those ankle, the strap on ankle weights." You
Yeah,
know,
hello, like 1980s, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, they're thinking that, okay, I got this ruck on, or my weighted vest, whatever you want to call them, using these interchangeably. I got the vest on, I got my ankle weights and I got my hand weights, like I'm good.
You're not good, girl. Yeah. I will say like when you have the weight on your torso or your core, like a ruck or a weighted vest, that's going to transfer a lot more comfortably. Like when you have your weight in your hands or on your ankles, a lot of times that's going to interfere with your gait. And
Mm,
once you start, walking, those walking mechanics are so important. So even if it's your arms, you think your arm swing is different, your feet aren't tracking like they usually do, you really put yourself at a bigger risk for injury when you have that weight at your extremities versus on your core where we tend to carry it. Women are really good ruckers because we tend to have a lower center of gravity a lot of times, and that can help us be better at rucking than men. So it's always fun to check that box too.
yeah, no, and that you nailed it. Because for me, I've always had like hip issues, so I'm always mindful of my gait. And because I'm so mindful of my gait, I always see people with like bad gaits. And so I'm like, if you're going to then like throw load on your ankles or throw load on your arms, I'm like, you're just taking, just a wrecking ball to what is already on like the edge of a cliff.
Exactly. Right. And adding weight if you're not practicing that good gait first is certainly not going to help. So if you're really new, I would say to fitness or are pretty sedentary, then maybe it starts with walking just to get some steps under your feet because that can really help build up some of those mechanics or you might be sore from just a walk depending on your,
Right.
activity level too. And
Right.
I
But
will
you,
say adding weight, it will shift your gait a little bit. So
mm,
I noticed when I start rucking, like my hips get really tight, or depending on your footwear, you might feel little like cricks and creaks in your feet. So even if you don't feel it day of, like don't go all in and, get cocky and throw 20, 30 pounds on to start.
right. And like, and you mentioned that like it's really good to review your footwear when you're out working because I know I'm a big footwear proponent and those of you guys who know me in person, they're like, oh my God, Kim talking about shoes, shut up. Um, I'm a huge proponent of shoes and I know that a lot of people will be like, it's just walking. And you'll just see these like shoes that I'm like, you've had those since the 80s. Please, for the love of God, throw them away.
And I would say with rucking, it takes a little bit of experimenting because depending on your terrain, like what your foot health looks like, if you have any sort of like plantar fasciitis or ankle issues, you might prefer something like a hiking boot. Something that's a little stiffer, I just say something that's got some good support, but that doesn't
Yeah.
have too much squish. Because I find if I do something that's really squishy, like maybe a running shoe, it's just, yeah, it's no bueno. The next
Yeah.
day, my like bones hurt, like my tendons. It's just, there's not enough support there to help buffer that extra load that you're wearing.
And for most people, I wouldn't think it's my shoes. I would think I would one blame Rucking or me. Like I
Hmm.
wouldn't be like it's my shoes.
Right. And then you stop doing it, right? Because you're
Yeah,
like, oh, that hurt. I
exactly.
don't want to do it anymore.
Exactly. And you would never be like, oh, it's these shoes I've had since 1995. That's the problem.
Hmm.
But they still look brand new because I've only worn them 3 times. Um, all right, enough guys. I know. I can totally
Can
get
I
on a
add
rub.
to that? Because, like you said, I've only worn them 3 times. With any footwear, it's like breaking them in over time too. Don't go for a 5K with your new shoes. Like maybe it's a half mile or a mile at a time. That's going to make a world of difference too, especially with something like a stiffer shoe,
Yeah.
like a hiking boot that really takes a lot longer. But once you got it, you're like, ooh, these are my shoe. Like it's hard to get
Right.
new ones after
And
that.
a lot of times, and then I'm literally going to move on, I promise you. So a lot of times, I recommend you go to a real shoe store. Like go to a store that like they sell sneakers. Tell them what you're trying to accomplish because they will put you in the right shoe. They'll watch you walk. Um, and versus I saw something on Amazon, they look cute. Like because I get it. Like trust me, I have such issues with my ankles and I'm such a proponent of this because once I got really good shoes, my ankle problems went away. And so I am like, I hate pain. And if I can easily get out of pain by buying a better pair of sneakers, raise my hand and here's take my credit card. Okay. So let's shift mental health, right? I know that I say that I go for my walks because it literally helps me not be crazy. So, is there any type of catalyst for change in your brain or anything like that by going for these walks?
The biggest part I would say is where you rock. And I
Mm,
would say specifically outside. So if you're getting outside, we know that we have benefits just reconnecting with nature, green exercise too. So rucking checks that box. You're essentially exercising in a natural environment, if you're getting out on some trails. But even if you're not, like you said, you can go around the neighborhood. So that getting outside component, if we can combine that with exercise, we really duplicate some of those mental health benefits like mental clarity. Like you said, you just feel like a better person when you're getting out. I know I've had a lot of clients where like I get my best ideas when I'm out for a ruck, or I work with a lot of busy moms or busy professionals who are like, this is my time to just not think about anything else. The nice thing when you have a ruck on versus just a walk is how you said there is that little bit of a suck component where you can't think about anything else because you're thinking about like putting one step in front of the other. So it does keep you occupied so you can't, Rolodex through the to-do list that's waiting for you after you get done. So I would say that having a little bit of extra difficulty takes your attention off of other things, which can help just get a brain break from all of the other responsibilities that we're fielding day to day.
yeah. And also, I know that sometimes when I am like sitting here in the thick of what I'm working on and I go for that walk, like what I'm sitting in feels like so heavy and like unsurmountable. And then when I come back from my walk, I'm like, oh, that's easy. Like it feels like, some type of like, I don't know, some knowledge has like been expounded on me through my walk.
Hmm. And I will say, you had mentioned continuous glucose monitoring
Hmm.
earlier. This is something where I've seen too, where I am thinking of one client in particular. She had a super stressful meeting and we saw her blood sugar
Oh
skyrocket. Like
yeah.
she had not eaten anything. And having that data, she was able to pivot. So she's like, okay, I can see like my body is not liking this. She got her ruck. She, instead of just plowing through the rest of her day, essentially pivoted and went for a ruck to help one, bring her blood sugar kind of back to baseline, but then also just decompress coming off of that. Like having not had that data and seeing how stress can impact things like cortisol and then pivoting, getting outside, really focusing on mental health, she was able to really kind of transform the rest of her day and not eat herself through the pantry at 9 p.m., which probably would have resulted had we not had that data.
Right. Yeah. And, I love how you just talked about it was just data, right? So many of us wear all sorts of wearables and we make meaning out of the data versus using the data to make better decisions. Like, it wasn't a binary thing. She kind of saw the trend and was like, oh, when I do this, this happens. When I do that, this happens. Okay, I want more of this than that in my life. And
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that that doesn't happen every now and then, but now she has that and was able to pivot and make more
and
empowered decisions.
right. And it's like, the more you know, the better you're able to say, okay, I know if I go down this path, this is what happens. I know if I go down that path, this is what happens. And you decide what path you want to go down. And some days you're like, you know what? It ain't gonna be the path to righteousness today, but
But
I
you
know
know the
where I'm going.
consequences.
Right. I
Yeah,
know where I'm
exactly.
gonna land.
Yeah. You know what's going to be served up for you after that when you pick that path. Yeah.
Right. So what inspired you to write the book? Like, here it is like 2020, you're like, I'm the Ruck Queen. And then you're like, I should write a book. Like, what made you decide to
It
write the
was
book?
certainly not on my agenda, to be honest. It was not on my agenda. I was sharing about rucking on social media. Like I had mentioned, I was just getting
Hmm.
lots of questions on it. And I actually had an agent reach out to me with a book idea about rucking. And he's like, hey, do you want to write a book? They really liked that it was coming from a female perspective because I
Right.
think rucking has maybe traditionally because of the military has been very masculine and intimidating,
Yeah.
like you said, and then having that nutrition and trainer background, we met and we're like, yeah, let's make it happen. So it
Yay.
was kind of a personal passion that turned book project. So
Cool. Cool.
yes, yep.
So now, here I am, I'm reading the book and I'm like, what do you hope that I would get out of the book?
My goal with the book was really to tease out some of that intimidation and
Mm,
inspire people to, really assess where they're at and I think see that they can make meaningful change. And it doesn't have to feel like a monumental task. Like
yeah.
if you're already walking, maybe it's adding a little bit of weight. But I think the sustainability, I know my personal fitness journey, I talk a little bit about, and it was a lot of all or nothing with food, with
Yes.
fitness. And I think for me, rucking was really one thing that became a steady component and something that I could tailor up for days that I felt that I wanted to challenge myself and I could taper down or again, maybe just do a walk. So I think that that all or nothing piece, my goal is okay, we have this great tool. How can we get results in the health department and really make that stick? Because we're really good at doing things for a short amount of time. We
Yeah.
might get, weight loss or strength, like whatever we're going for. But 6 months down the road, like what are the odds that you're going to continue doing this? So I really wanted to introduce something in a digestible way that was very accessible, and rucking is something that's very low cost, very entry leveled, regardless of age or fitness level. It's something I believe just about anybody can do. And it's something that you can do by yourself or you can do with others. So I love that social component too, is like getting outside, connecting with nature, but then also connecting with others too, if that's, in your wheelhouse. Cause I feel like people are maybe craving that
Yeah.
social fitness a little bit more. And that's a great way to bring in accountability and really level out, I think, the physical component, the mental health, and wrap it all up and bring it together.
No, I really like that. And I also like the fact that you talked about how this is less about perfection. It's about the little baby steps that we can take through it. That it's not every day that you're not failing if you don't have a ruck on. It's the habit, right? The little habit that you do. And some days you're feeling it, and other days you walk in the door like I do, and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't put it on. And you move on. You're like, oh yeah, I forgot that. Okay, the end.
Exactly. And really sustainability is what
A
it's all
thousand
about.
percent. A thousand
Mhm.
percent. All
Mhm.
right. So I always like to end my podcast with some rapid fire questions. So these are just literally like quick, no thinking
Oh,
answers.
I overthink. So
I
I'll do
know.
my best to
I
just
know. We
do the
should start.
first thing.
I know. I should start a support group. It would probably be like bigger than like Weight Watchers. All right. So
Yes. My heart's pumping. Okay. No.
yeah. All right. Ideal beginner weight.
10 pounds.
Trails or neighborhood streets.
Trails.
Music, podcast, or silence.
Podcast.
Okay, so now that's just totally took me to a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Type of podcast. Are you going like, are you listen, type of podcast are you listening to?
I usually do like health and fitness, I would say. I haven't gone down any of like the crime junkies and things like that. I feel like once
Don't,
I
don't do
do
it.
that rabbit hole, there's no coming
It's
back.
crack. It's crack.
Yeah.
It's crack. Just don't do it. Just stay away from
Yes.
it.
Right.
And what would you say the best unexpected benefit of rocking has been for you?
I mentioned this, but I will say the mental health piece. I would say nature is a big part of that. So just getting me out of my head and into nature.
And if rocking were a personality trait, what would it be?
Ooh, like G.I. Jane, I would
Ooh.
say.
Would you
Okay,
shave your
so I
head?
have a little side. I went on a Rucking retreat, like a women's retreat.
Oh, how was it?
It was amazing. And it was in Costa Rica, but we like jumped off of this boat with our rucks on. We swam to shore and did a workout in the sand, and it was pouring rain, and we just like felt so badass. And it was, yeah,
You
it
lost me
sounds a
at
little
jump out
in
of a boat.
that was my biggest fear. I was on the dry boat because I'm like, this girl can't swim very good. And so I'm like, I'm on the dry boat. I am, I have zero pride. Just get me up to shore. I'll
Yeah,
jump off from there. Maybe my feet will get wet. But our like captain was looking at us, like waiting for us to jump off the boat. And we're like, dude, this is the dry boat. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm not
right.
kidding. That's
I
the
want to walk
ocean.
onto that island like Lovey Howe. Like, no way.
Exactly. But I did find out that a rock can double as a flotation device. So
Oh,
yeah, surprisingly, that was, one benefit I didn't
yeah.
didn't
In
expect.
in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna be the drowned girl everyone's gonna talk about for the rest of the retreat.
Yes, but like we all just bonded for life. That was such an
Nice.
awesome day. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, awesome,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Um, so coffee before or after your rock?
Before my favorite pre-workout.
Awesome. So if anyone's thinking, you know what, she made this sound pretty approachable, like what's the first step they would take right now?
I would say do it with something you have on hand. You probably have a backpack laying around. Find that dumbbell, find a bath towel or something just to, you know, do a little MacGyvering this first time and just get that first one out of the way. If you find out that it's something that you like, then you can scale up your equipment with something like a specific rucksack or a weighted vest if you don't have
Hmm.
it. But the biggest mistake I see is just not doing it or at least giving it a try. If your neighbors look at you funny, I promise they won't after a while, but just get that first one in.
I sprint in my driveway, so my neighbors are already looking at me, and I walk in my pajamas. So there's that. So
Yeah,
I'm
my
just
neighbors
giving,
feel like they're catching me if I don't have it on. They're like, "You're not wearing your pack today."
right. So okay, we're making you feel seen.
Yeah.
Like it's okay. We did it, and we're still alive to tell the story.
Yes.
All right. So where can people find you on the socials and Ruck Fit?
I'm at Kayla Girgen on all the things. So you can find me at kaylagirgenrd.com, Kayla Girgen RD on Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active. TikTok, I'm just recycling some of my Instagram content. So if you want something live,
Ah,
and then if you go to my website too, kaylagirgenrd.com, I do have a free weekly newsletter where I'm sending out tips and, whether it's nutrition, it's recipes, it's rucking related, kind of whatever is on my heart that week. So that's always a great way to stay in touch too.
and I do end my podcast with one last question. What's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Ooh, rucking. Of course.
I was
Yeah.
she's probably gonna say Rucking, but I've asked this for over 300 episodes, and everyone is like, I've never got a repeat, and it's always something that's I'm like, oh, that's a good one too. So yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, folks, go out,
Yes,
buy.
it just makes me feel like a total badass and yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, guys, go out, buy your book, get yourself a, we all have, I don't know, I am a bag junkie. Don't tell my husband, but I probably do have one too many bags, because that's who I am. And I could probably throw in one, I could probably go into my closet right now and grab myself a work pack. And so I want you to think that this is one of these conversations that I'm hoping that made you realize that you don't need more motivation, you don't need a harder plan, you don't need to suffer. You just actually need to do something. And if that made you think today, okay, this is your sign, right? Kyla's book, Ruck Fit, is all about making strength and movement and health feel fun in real life, not be like, I now need to schedule this into my already jam-packed day. So I'm going to link all the things we talked about in the show notes. Make sure you follow her. And just remember, start where you are, right? We all have, we're all a beginner. And so if you're listening to this while you're walking now, good gold star. But just promise me one thing, you will stop the overthinking. Simple, simple, simple. It works for everyone. All right, Magic Makers, I will talk to you next week and enjoy the rest of your day.